It was Christmas Eve, the kind that carries an odd silence with it. Not peace, but tension, like the world is holding its breath. The snow hadn't started falling yet, but the cold had already crawled into everything. The lights on the porch flickered the way they always did, that little reminder that I'd been putting off replacing the wire for another year. My son Daniel was outside, checking the gate, something I'd told him to do 100 times when he was younger, though he hadn't lived here for years. He had come home that morning, unannounced, just showed up with his old duffel bag slung over his shoulder, and that same grin I hadn't seen since before the arguments started. It had been, 2 years since we last spoke? Maybe more, but there he was, acting like no time had passed. I should have been happy. I was, for a moment, until I noticed the way he looked around the house, not with nostalgia, but like a stranger walking through someone else's life. He didn't say much. Neither did I. We both filled the silence with small tasks, him chopping wood, me pretending to fix the thermostat that didn't need fixing. That's what men do when they don't know how to talk. They work around the silence, hoping it breaks itself. Then, right before dinner, I heard the clank of the gate outside. It's an old iron thing, the kind you have to lift a little to latch properly. Daniel was locking it, with the heavy padlock I keep hanging by the shed. I opened the door and called out to him. "What are you doing?" He just said, "Don't want anyone coming in tonight." His tone wasn't sharp, just final. I didn't argue. That's the thing about family, sometimes you learn to stop asking questions, not because you trust them, but because you're tired of not understanding. We had dinner mostly in silence. The roast chicken sat between us, untouched longer than it should have been. I poured him a drink, but he didn't touch that either. He kept glancing toward the window, toward the yard, as if waiting for something. Or someone. When the clock hit 9, he excused himself, said he was going to check the perimeter. I wanted to laugh. The perimeter? What was this? A military base? But something in his voice stopped me. After he stepped outside, I sat there for a while, staring at the Christmas tree. Half the lights didn't work. The top branch leaned slightly to the right, because I'd used an old stand that never sat straight. And yet, that tree held more warmth than the whole house did that night. I thought of when Daniel was 10, when we used to decorate together. He used to insist on hanging all the ornaments in one corner because that's where Santa will look first. He believed in things back then. In magic, in fairness, in me. Now, he was out there somewhere in the dark, and I couldn't tell what he believed in anymore. A few minutes later I heard something, not the gate this time, but a muffled thud, like boots slipping on wet soil. I opened the door, the cold slicing into my chest, and saw the faint outline of Daniel near the fence. He wasn't moving much, just standing there, staring beyond the property. "Everything all right?" I called out. He didn't answer at first. Then he said, "Yeah, just making sure it's locked." But his voice cracked halfway through. That's when I realized he wasn't checking the gate. He was standing guard. It's strange how your instincts come back when the world feels wrong. I stepped out, crunching over the frozen grass, and joined him. The moonlight revealed something in his hand, a small photograph, edges worn, like it had been folded and unfolded too many times. He noticed me looking and quickly tucked it into his jacket. "You cold?" he asked. "Little," I said. "You?" he shrugged. "I've been colder." That was true. He'd spent years out there, in places I only heard about through headlines, deployments, deserts, outposts. When he finally came back, he was thinner, quieter, like someone had shaved the youth out of him, and whatever he saw out there, he never shared. We stood there in silence for a while. The metal gate gleamed faintly in the dark, the padlock reflecting the porch light like an unblinking eye. Then he said something that didn't make sense at first. "You ever feel like some doors should stay locked?" I thought he was speaking metaphorically. I gave the kind of answer fathers give when they're trying to sound wise but careful. Depends on what's behind them. He smiled, but it wasn't real. Sometimes it's not what's behind them. It's what might come through if you open them. There was something in his tone, that mix of fear and exhaustion, I'd only heard once before, the night he left for basic training. Back then, he was scared of what he didn't know. Now it sounded like he was scared of what he did. We went back inside, but he didn't take off his jacket, didn't sit either, just paced around, eyes flicking between the door and the window, every sound outside pulling his attention like a magnet. "Who are you expecting?" I finally asked. He didn't answer right away. Then he muttered, "No one, just habits." But it didn't feel like a habit. It felt like preparation. I tried to distract him, told him I'd set up the guest room, even though I knew he'd probably crash on the couch like he used to, but he shook his head. "I'll stay near the door." I wanted to argue, but the truth is, I was starting to feel it too, that same tension in the air, like the world outside was listening. An hour passed. Then, another. The clock ticked louder than usual. Around midnight, I must have dozed off in the armchair, because the next thing I remember is hearing the lock rattle. Not from the outside, from within. I opened my eyes, disoriented, and saw Daniel at the door again, hands trembling slightly as he tried to unlock it. "What are you doing?" I asked. He froze. "I forgot something." His voice was barely a whisper. I walked closer. "Out there?" He nodded. "Yeah." But he didn't move. He just stood there, staring at the handle like it was something alive. I could see his reflection in the window, pale, haunted, and ashamed. That's when I noticed his other hand. It was gripping that same photograph again. This time, I saw it clearly. It was of him and another boy, same uniform, same tired eyes. But the other boy wasn't smiling. He must have seen me looking because he said he didn't make it. The words hung in the air, heavy and cold. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. He exhaled shakily and continued. "We made a promise. If one of us, if something happened, the other would go back. To the house. To lock the gate. To keep what followed from finding the family." He laughed under his breath, a hollow, breaking sound. I thought it was just talk. Just soldiers talking to make dying sound noble. He looked up at me. It wasn't. I felt the air leave my chest. "Daniel," I said softly, "what's out there?" He turned the key and whispered, "Not what, who." And before I could stop him, the latch clicked, and the night swallowed the sound. The door swung open, just enough to let the cold spill in like water from a cracked dam. I could see his breath in the air as he stepped outside, the wind biting at his jacket, the world beyond the porch drenched in darkness. I wanted to call his name, to demand answers, but something in me stayed quiet. Maybe it was fear, or maybe it was the strange feeling that if I spoke too soon, I'd break whatever fragile balance was keeping this night from falling apart. He walked slowly, almost deliberately, like he was listening for something I couldn't hear. The snow had started to fall, not thick yet, but enough to catch the porch light. The flakes landed on his shoulders, melting instantly. For a few moments I just stood there, watching him walk toward the gate, the padlock still swinging open in his hand. When he reached it, he stopped. Then, instead of closing it again, he pushed it wide open. The hinges groaned in protest, the sound slicing through the silence. I felt my stomach tighten. He didn't move after that, just stood there, staring into the empty dark beyond the fence, like he was waiting for something to come through. I finally stepped outside. "Daniel," I said, "tell me what's going on." He didn't turn around. You wouldn't believe me if I did. "Try me," I said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "When we were stationed out in Kandahar, there was this night, Christmas Eve actually. We got caught in a firefight, lost comms, lost men. Me and Davis, we made it out barely. But when they pulled us back, something wasn't right. Davis wouldn't talk, wouldn't sleep. Just kept saying he couldn't go home until he made it right. He paused. A week later they found him, outside the wire. No weapon, no gear, just gone. The snow fell heavier now, the world turning ghostly white around us. They said he must have gone mad, Daniel continued, but I saw the look in his eyes before he left. It wasn't madness, it was terror, like he'd heard something whispering to him. He turned then, finally meeting my eyes, and last night I heard it too. I felt the blood drain from my face. Heard what? It said the same thing it said to him, he whispered. Lock the gate, or it will follow you home. For a second, I thought he was losing it, the kind of post-deployment paranoia I'd only ever read about, but never really understood. But then, I remembered something. A few nights ago, I'd been woken up by the sound of dogs barking down the road, all at once, like a chain reaction. I'd stepped out and seen movement near the tree line. Thought it was a deer, maybe, but the longer I watched, the more it felt like it was watching back. Still, I forced a shaky laugh. You're telling me something followed you from Afghanistan to Maine? He didn't smile. You think I don't know how that sounds? I've been trying to convince myself I'm crazy, Dad. But then last night, when I finally slept, I saw him, Davis, standing outside the fence. Daniel. He was wearing the same gear, same torn sleeve. But his eyes. He shook his head slowly. They weren't his eyes anymore. I wanted to say something comforting, something rational, but instead I heard myself say, "Then why unlock the gate?" He swallowed hard, because he asked me to. The way he said it, calm, matter of fact, sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the wind. I tried to ignore it, he said, but when I got here, I started dreaming about it again. The gate, the promise, the voice. And tonight, it felt like if I didn't open it, something worse would happen. I looked past him, into the dark woods beyond the property. There was nothing there, no movement, no sound, just the quiet hum of falling snow. But still, the air felt heavier, thicker, as if something unseen had shifted. I walked closer to him. We're going inside, I said. Now. He didn't move. I grabbed his arm. Firm. Daniel. That's when he said something I'll never forget. You can't unopen a door, Dad. You can only face what walks through it. And then the wind picked up. It wasn't a gust. It was like the air itself shuddered. The trees beyond the fence bent slightly, and a low sound, like a distant hum, rolled through the ground. It wasn't thunder. It was too steady, too alive. Daniel turned toward the darkness again. It's here, he said quietly. The next few seconds stretched like hours. I couldn't tell if my heart was pounding or if the sound was coming from outside. Then, out of the black, a figure appeared. Not walking. Just standing there, right where the fence met the woods. It was tall, too tall to be human, but shaped like one. The snow didn't seem to land on it, it just avoided it. Every instinct in me screamed to run, to shut the door, to pretend none of this was happening. But Daniel stepped forward. Davis? He called out. The figure didn't move, but the air shifted again, a faint vibration, like someone speaking from inside your own skull. And even though I couldn't make out the words, I knew, whatever it wasn't human speech. Daniel's hand trembled as he reached into his jacket, pulling out the photograph again. He held it up. I kept my promise, he said, voice cracking. I locked it. You can rest now. The figure tilted its head slightly. Then it started to move, not walking but gliding, each step silent, the snow untouched beneath it. Daniel! I shouted, grabbing his shoulder. But before I could pull him back, he turned to me, eyes wide, and said, "You can't see it the way I do." He stepped forward again, toward the thing. It stopped, just beyond the open gate, as if waiting for permission. Daniel took another step, then another, until he stood only a few feet away. The air between them seemed to blur, like heat rising off asphalt, though the night was freezing. Then, without warning, the thing leaned forward, and for a split second, I saw a flash of a face. Not a monster's, not a stranger's, but Davis's. His expression was calm, grateful even. And then, gone. The wind died instantly. The trees stilled. The silence that followed was absolute. Daniel dropped the photograph into the snow. His knees buckled, and I caught him just before he fell. When I looked up, the figure had vanished. He was breathing hard, but his face looked lighter, like a weight had finally slipped off his chest. "It's over," he whispered. "He's gone." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But as I helped him back inside, closing the door behind us, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The padlock was gone. I stared at the empty latch for what felt like a full minute before my brain could even form the thought. It wasn't possible. The padlock was a heavy steel one, the kind that doesn't just fall off. I'd used it for years. It had rust along the base, a small dent on one side where I'd hit it with a hammer once to unjam it. It was gone. Completely gone. I turned back to Daniel, but he was already slumped in the armchair, eyes half open, breathing steady like he'd fallen into an exhausted sleep. I wanted to wake him, to ask what he saw, what really happened out there, but looking at him, the way his shoulders finally seemed at peace, the lines in his forehead smoothing out, I couldn't bring myself to. So I let him rest. I poured myself a drink instead. My hands were still shaking when the whiskey hit the glass. The warmth didn't do much to stop the cold that had settled in me. I sat across from him, watching the fire flicker, trying to piece together what just happened. Every logical part of my mind screamed that there had to be an explanation. Trauma, hallucination, suggestion, something. But no theory could explain why the gate was open, or why I still felt something standing just beyond the edges of the yard, watching. Around 1 in the morning, the power flickered. Just once. Then again. The Christmas lights outside went dark. The hum of the heater died, and the only sound left was the fire crackling and the faint whistle of the wind. I went to check the fuse box, and that's when I noticed something else. Footprints. They weren't mine. They weren't Daniel's. These prints were long, almost twice the size of a boot, leading from the gate straight up to the porch. But what froze me wasn't their size. It was the shape. The impressions were deep at the heel and light at the front, like whoever, or whatever, made them didn't quite touch the ground with its toes. I followed them with my flashlight until they stopped right at the door. No more prints beyond that. No sign of where it went. I closed the door again, locked it this time, sliding the deadbolt in with a slow click. When I turned around, Daniel was awake, watching me. He didn't look confused or afraid, just alert. "You saw it too, didn't you?" he asked quietly. I hesitated. "What do you mean?" "The prints," I nodded. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. "Then it wasn't just me." "What was it?" I asked. "If your friend's gone, what's still out there?" He rubbed his face. "I don't know. But whatever it was, it didn't come for me." He looked up, eyes narrowing toward the window. "It came for you." The way he said it made my heart stop. "For me?" He nodded slowly. "When it spoke to me the first time, it didn't say lock the gate, it said lock his gate." For a second I didn't understand. Then it hit me. The house wasn't just mine, it was the same house my father built. The same gate he locked every night until the day he died. I'd never told Daniel this, but when I was a boy, my father used to tell me a story, one I always brushed off as old country superstition. He said every Christmas Eve you had to lock the gate before midnight, because that's when the uninvited came. Not spirits, not demons, just those who were once invited but had been forgotten. Those who died holding grudges they couldn't let go of. I remember him saying you keep the gate locked, not to keep them out, but to remind them they don't live here anymore. For decades, I thought it was nonsense. Until that moment. I walked to the mantel, staring at the old photo still framed there, my father, me, and a much younger Daniel. My father's arm around both of us. That was the last Christmas we spent together before he passed. Behind me, Daniel said, "Dad, what if you didn't forget? What if you just stopped believing?" I turned to him slowly. "What are you saying?" He pointed toward the photo. "He said that line, didn't he? About the gate?" I nodded. "He wasn't warning you about something evil. He was warning you about something owed." The air seemed to thicken. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney, but the warmth didn't reach me anymore. "Something owed?" I repeated. Daniel stood up. "When I was out there tonight, I didn't just see Davis. I saw others. Not clear, not faces, but shadows, moving behind him, like they were following him, like he was leading them somewhere." He took a step closer, and when I opened the gate, they didn't stop at me. They went past. "Past where?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He pointed at the floorboards beneath us. "Here." The room suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. The faint sound of wind outside turned into something else, a low rhythmic creak, like the slow opening and closing of an old door. Then the fire dimmed, just dimmed, as if something was standing between it and us. Daniel turned toward it, eyes wide again. "They're here," he whispered. And then the smell hit. Faint at first, like damp soil and iron, then stronger, like rusted metal and old rain. I wanted to move, but I couldn't. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something deeper, recognition. Because that smell, it was the same one I remembered from the night my father died. The night he told me he'd locked the gate one last time. Daniel backed toward me slowly, his voice shaking now. "You said he built this place. What did he bury under it?" I didn't answer. Couldn't, because I didn't know. But as the floor began to creak and the shadows on the walls started to stretch unnaturally long, I realized something awful. The sound wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was coming from beneath us. Daniel whispered, "Dad, what did you unlock?" And that's when the fire went out completely.